Welcome back to the Lanterne Rouge Cycling Podcast with Benji Naesen. This is our Vuelta Espana recap. A little bit delayed, me catching up on some sleep. I don't know what Benji's been up to. I'll let him tell you in a second. This podcast is brought to you by our sponsor, Lacole. If you haven't checked out their road performance cycling apparel provided to Bahrain McLaren in the Pro Peloton. By the way, Wout Poels kind of doing a bit of a high miles of Beldia, according to La Flamme Rouge. This Vuelta. He came 6th overall on GC at this year's Vuelta. So a pretty good year for Bahrain McLaren, I'd say, actually, with Poels up there, Mikel Landa doing pretty well in the Tour as well, and Bilbao doing quite nicely in the Giro d'Italia. So if you haven't checked out Lacole's kit, you can see them at www.lacole.cc. They've supported our podcast on this journey this year in 2020, which will be continuing in 2021. So supporting them helps us out. But this Vuelta, Benji, well, actually, before we get into the Vuelta, what have you been doing? No cycling for like 5 days, 6 days, I don't know how long. I feel different. What have you been up to? Just like tractors hitting your car, things like that?
How about we stop about the tractor? It's not a fun moment to think about. But I, as a full-time job, I'm a developer. I create web apps, mobile apps, etc. And I think I've dove in a bit more into that recently, now that I've got some more time for just plain free time. And yeah, as a consequence, I've also just become addicted to TV shows again. So The Mandalorian and such, yeah, I'm totally into it. So that's great. But I somewhat stepped out of cycling for a week, perhaps good, because I was a bit oversaturated with the whole season. I feel like I'm ready to dive into the off season again with some fun pods with you.
Yeah, I agree. It almost felt like they tried to get all the races in at once. And by the way, I want to say at the outset of this podcast, a big congratulations to all the race organisers. I'm not sure if we've done that spiel yet, but a big congrats to them for putting on as many races as they were able to. ASO, RCS, Flanders Classics. It's almost unbelievable that they were able to do so, especially with the second wave of COVID hitting Europe, and that had already started with, I think, the Vuelta on. It actually seems that despite the expense associated with it, it is almost safer in the bubble. It probably is statistically safer in the bubble. The Vuelta having 0 positive COVID tests. So obviously you'd expect a lot more of that in the general population, the way Spain, etc. were going. So that is a really good sign for next year, is that ASO, RCS, Flanders Classics can go to respective governments, local governments that they require the permission from to host races or put the races on and say, listen, we have a track record now. These are our procedures that we put in place to limit the COVID, etc. And the preventative measures we've done in 2020 were very effective. So please let us carry on the races. So that's really good, or good news for 2021. In my view. But I just want to do a quick recap, not as long as the Giro one, a quick recap of the stages and the GC positions. Roglic was the heavy favourite for GC going in. He was at like $2, shortest favourite all year for any of the GCs. Carapaz was second favourite. Actually, no, that is wrong. Tom Dumoulin was second favourite, and he was my pick for overall GC at $6, and Carapaz was about $8 to $9. And I think, Benji, you picked Danny Martinez for GC. I'm not having a go at you. I'm just trying to
I don't want to talk about it.
Okay. Well, that's not I picked him in my Velo Games team. He just had a crash again. But, I think he would have been up there on GC too. But anyway, 18 stages. These are the stage winners. Roglic won the first stage. That late attack sprint against the GC guys, Sepp Kuss leading him out, goes into the red jersey already on stage 1. Marc Soler won the second stage to Leckenberry. With a downhill attack. Great stage win from Marc Soler. Stage 3, Dan Martin won an uphill sprint, just beating Carapaz and Roglic. Roglic still in the red jersey. Stage 4, the first flat sprint, Sam Bennett won pretty comfortably. Stage 5, breakaway with, I think, Wellins and Arensman and Guillaume Martin. Wellins dusted them off in an uphill sprint. Roglic, I think this might have been... Yeah, Roglic, I think, beat the other GC guys and maybe collected a few more seconds. Not sure, though. Stage 6 to Formigal. This is the rainy stage, the jacket gate. We still don't know what happened with Jumbo-Visma. Maybe I'll try to bully one of the Jumbo-Visma guys into telling us what actually happened with because they said they just had a tricky situation. It was a rainy stage. Roglic lost 40 seconds. Carapaz goes into the red jersey. Yoni Zagira, the swimmer, gets his rain cape out. Or didn't even wear a rain cape, actually, and won this stage. Stage 7, Mike Woods in that group of 5. I like this stage finish. It was a very good stage, beating Valverde and co. I'm pretty sure this one was. Carapaz staying in red. Then my best stage of this year's Vuelta, stage 8 to Moncalvillo. Primoz Roglic won after a proper battle with Richie Carapaz, each throwing haymakers at one another, but Carapaz still keeps the red jersey. Stage 9, next flat sprint. Says it's won by Pascal Ackermann. Was this the Sam Bennett relegation one, Benji?
I'm guessing it was. I don't remember anymore.
I don't remember
somehow
Ackermann coming across the line first, except for the last stage.
Yeah, but I've got in general just a feeling that this Vuelta is over, but the Vuelta has a special thing where, compared to other Grand Tours, stages don't stick as easily with me in my memory. And if I look at the Giro, for example, I believe that stages there seem to be much more clear in my memory compared to some of these Vuelta stages, and I don't know why that is. It feels like there wasn't that real Queen stage where just everything exploded, and I think we'll talk about that a bit after we go through the stages here.
Yeah, I agree with you, and maybe it's not the Vuelta's fault this year. It was at the back end of a very, very condensed, hectic schedule. Stage 10 to Swanses. Primoz Roglic taking his third stage win, goes back into the red jersey. I think this was the controversy regarding the sprint seconds or whatever, the 3-second rule, for him then protesting before the next stage, maybe, to Farapona. I think that's right. Yeah, Roglic won that uphill sprint when his team weren't really working all day, except for the last K. Stage 11 to Farapona. David Godot won his first Grand Tour stage pretty easily, actually. Roglic still in red. Stage 12, the Angleroo, won by Hugh Carthy, and Richie Carapaz putting, I think, 12 seconds into Roglic, takes back the red jersey. Stage 13, the ITT, we think the last real stage where there could have been big GC movement, or I thought that, to Mirador de Ezaro. I thought the Vuelta was over at this point. Roglic won the ITT, beating, I think, Barta by like 0.2 of a second. That was pretty heartbreaking for him, taking his fourth stage win. Goes back into the red jersey, I think 36 seconds ahead of, or 38 seconds ahead of Richie Carapaz. Stage 14, Tim Wellins won another stage. Good Vuelta from Tim Wellins. Roglic still in red. I think that was from a break as well. Yes, it was Wellins. That was a narrow, twisty ascent where Wellins, I think, got on the front ahead of Woods and co, but Woods was probably the strongest. Jasper Philipsen took his first Grand Tour stage win in stage 15, a lovely sprint from him, and he came second to Bennett on stage 4. He looked really good all well to Philipsen. He's going to be better than I even thought he was going to be, given his versatility, even on some of these uphill finishes. Stage 16 to Theodad Rodrigo, Magnus Cort, the Dane, taking his biggest win this year, and maybe for a couple of years. He's, I think, staying at Education First. He'll be joined by Danish compatriot Valgren next year. Roglic still in red. Stage 17, the last stage for GC action. Covertier, won by Godot from the break. Once again, same sort of scenario for his first stage win. Roglic hanging on to the red jersey after losing time, losing 25 seconds to Carapaz, winning the Vuelta there. Stage 18, the procession. Pascal Ackermann won the sprint by 2 inches ahead of Sam Bennett after Bennett didn't get the best lead out. So, yeah, just reminding you of what happened there. Any of those that reminded you, oh, that was actually a great stage, Benji, or any of them kind of forgetful? I'll say before you answer, too many medium mountain stages with a punchy finish. Like that Dan Martin stage win in stage 3, that stage is going to be consigned to be forgotten by everybody. I'd already forgotten about it just because of the way it was raced. There was just too many of those medium mountain stages, I think.
Yeah, I somewhat agree. We spoke about the profiles of La Vuelta versus the other Grand Tours in the last episode, I think, or on the Covatia stage recap. And I believe that we had a clear point there that we are missing a real Queen stage here and perhaps towards the end of this Grand Tour. And that's something that really comes to mind here. On the other opposite side, if I compare it to previous Vueltas, people were saying that the Vuelta is different than the Giro and Tour because it's like this most of the time. But I disagree that it's like this. I think that overall the Vuelta is always a bit less higher mountain stages, but they still keep the last week interesting. And right now I felt like the GC was decided after the time trial, and that kind of made me less interested in GC change in the last week. Perhaps the only moment that I really cared was that Carapaz attack, where Onkovatia, he dropped Roglic. So that was perhaps one of the key moments of the last week. But all in all, the funniest and most timed and probably a decent tactic moment throughout this Grand Tour would be one of my top moments. And it's perhaps a silly moment, but I found it great that on stage 17 on the Covatia stage, we had a attack by Carapaz. He dropped Roglic, and just not even a minute later, someone comes from the ashes of the breakaway and starts helping Roglic, and that was Hofstede, Leonard Hofstede. And I don't know why, but these satellite rider moves always stick with me. I remember a satellite ride in the Giro of 2016 that brought Nibali the victory. And actually, two of them, I think Kanget in stage 20, could be wrong on that. And I think on stage 19, we had the oh so lovely Scarponi that was in the breakaway that day, literally stood still on one of the climbs to wait for Nibali that had attacked after the Kruiswijk crash on top of, I don't even know which climb it was, but doesn't matter. Passo Umbrai? No, that's the one Dumoulin had his issue with. I don't know. It was a climb in stage 19 of the Giro stage. Yeah. Anyway, I feel like those satellite rider moments stick with me a lot, and just the pure timing and essence of that Leonard Hofstede help. It might not have been the key help, because I still believe that Soler probably helped Roglic more than his own teammate did, but it's just the fact that you can put on these kind of stages, one with perhaps only a major climb at the end, because throughout that stage you had hills and some decent mountains, but nothing that was ridden at a top pace that drops most of the peloton. And as a consequence, there is the ability to send people in the breakaway that perhaps are not the best climbers. And Hofstede is not the best climber for sure. And he was sent in the breakaway that day, and it worked out perfectly. At the right moment, he was still there, and at the right moment, he was there to help out Roglic in the moment he needed him the most. So it's a small moment, but
Okay.
I love it. I love it.
Chris, I watched Chris Horner's video on that stage, and he was saying that Jumbo-Visma messed up a lot of tactics on that stage, some of which I agreed with. But he said the Hofstede satellite rider was that working out for Roglic was pure luck, and I don't agree with that, because it, in my view, is clearly by design. We see that quite often, and the fact that Hofstede was able to pull for 2 minutes is something that could be expected. Every rider of Hofstede's level, you've got to remember, Hofstede was told to go easy on that final climb. So he's been conserving energy. So for Hofstede, I think Amateur Pirelli put on Twitter that Hofstede did like 6.1 watts per kilo for 2 minutes, as long as Power Strava data. Did 6.1, 6 watts per kilo for 2 minutes for Roglic, pacing him at 25 k's an hour, where a draft is important at that speed. And it probably saved Roglic a fair bit of power, especially when we're talking out threshold. I don't think it's beyond belief or luck or anything that Hofstede could be expected to do 6 watts per kilo for 2 minutes when he's been doing maybe the climb at just below threshold before then, because he's been told to take it easy or not go full gas going for the stage win. So I didn't really see that part of it as luck for Jumbo-Visma. I thought they made other mistakes on that stage with basically following the rampant pace of Ida Schelling when they didn't need to, with Bennett, and that kind of burnt Bennett and Kuss early. But yeah, what did you think about? By the way, I like Horner's comments, etc. I watched some of his videos. He's done it for every stage, not just the Tour. So you've got to respect that. Every sort of major Grand Tour stage. But yeah, what did you think about that, Benji? Did you think it was just luck that Hofstede was there at the right moment?
No, I don't believe it's pure luck. I do believe that you need luck for it to happen. You need the race to fall a certain way for it to work out. And it worked out, but it was clearly put in place to have an opportunity of happening. And if you plan that out and there's a limited chance that it works out, if it works out, you still get the credit for doing it because they decided to do that early, they decided to try that out, and the likes of Ineos and so forth, they did not have that. I don't believe that Carapaz had too much help of his team that day, to be honest. We saw on the small climb before Covatia that Froome had that small attack with Carapaz, and perhaps you could say that that made the peloton a bit more tired or something, but I don't believe that the work of Ineos that day really put too much of a teeth into Jumbo's ability to control the race at that point. So I believe that perhaps a better idea would have been to put a satellite rider for Carapaz up there. But the question then is, would the peloton be as
Brandon
close
Rivera?
to the breakaway? No, but perhaps I don't know. I feel like you got quite a few riders in there. If Hofstede can get in the breakaway and do this, then I believe that a medium climber at Ineos, look at their team. They've got Froome, they've got Amador still. They don't have too much left. Sosa was horrible this Vuelta. I still don't know what he was
There's
doing.
no way they could do it. Froome's not good enough.
With Amador and Froome.
Froome's not good enough, and Amador, you can't send him up the road because if something bad happens, he's the one that has to pace Carapaz back. He's the guy protecting Carapaz. Jumbo-Visma can only do it because they can leave Vingegaard, Bennett, and Koos back there protecting Roglic, working with him. If Ineos sent Amador, the only guy that could fulfill that role, by the way, I mean, we put this down to talk about this, but let's talk about it now. Richard Carapaz and Ineos. Okay, Golas, Rivera, Sosa, Worth, Froome, zero benefit at all. I mean, yeah, they controlled a break, Worth and Froome, at 5.5 minutes one day, a small break. That's not getting you over the line. I mean, this is one of the weakest teams Ineos have sent in support of a big GC leader. And often the Vuelta, I mean, maybe that's not true. Maybe the Vuelta last year, they also, sometimes they're forgotten Grand Tour. They had De La Cruz, I think, as their leader maybe last year. Dylan Van Baal, again, not on great form. Not his fault, by the way. He flew from Flanders to the Vuelta he had not even a day's break just about between those races. He had a very condensed schedule. So all they had, the only person that really performed on Ineos was Amador, because Worth and Froome would have been better at a Giro-style race, not a punchy sort of parkour like this. So Carapaz only really got one guy that can help him the whole time. You can't set up long-range attacks with just one guy. So I think Benji Carapaz is much better than I thought he was. Even this Vuelta, he keeps improving in my estimation. Just how he's able to come second in this year's Vuelta with almost no team support. The other riders like Vlasov and co maybe didn't either. It wasn't as competitive in the 5th to 8th positions. But still, I think next year Carapaz and Thomas should be the GC favourites for Ineos for the Tour de France. And they shouldn't even send Egan Bernal.
Wow. I don't know.
You weren't ready for that hot take.
Yeah, I wasn't ready for that. I don't place Thomas on that level. And the reason I don't do that is because in 2018, Thomas was on that top level with, everybody. He basically dominated by being great at the last kilometer. Now Roglic has that too, and I'd say that Roglic is better at that than Thomas. That's my take here. I know a lot of British people watch this, so sorry in advance, but I don't believe Thomas is as good as a GC rider as you're thinking. And
it's not about being the best in the world. It's about the way those two complement each other. You've got the Thomas, who's the best Grand Tour TT rider, apart from maybe Remco, who I don't know if he's doing the Tour next year. Thomas is a better TT rider than Roglic. I think that's pretty clear.
Given Roglic is a better climber than Thomas.
I know that, but Roglic maybe is going to be gaining a attacking the last K, getting bonus seconds. You got to remember, Roglic won this Vuelta by 25 seconds. Okay, so he's gained mostly all of his time on Carapaz on bonus seconds. So will Roglic, if he's got someone who's ahead of him on GC, maybe, I don't know, I haven't looked at the route properly, but there's more TTKs. Thomas can put time into Roglic, TT kilometers, and then you've got the attacking climber, who I think is a better climber probably than Roglic across 3 weeks. Carapaz, you've got him as sort of an attacking rider. I just think that's a better combination to try and work against Jumbo-Visma. That's why Roglic is stronger than individually. Roglic is stronger than both of them head to head. But as a team, maybe they can try and do something. That's my point about Carapaz. I think he's got really complementary skills to Thomas.
I get it. I get it in the sense that you've got Thomas indeed that might be able to play the more defensive role after a time trial, and Carapaz is indeed the more attacking and offensive rider that can put some pressure on Roglic, while Thomas is in a bit of a golden seat in the back. But I feel like we're quickly writing off Bernal, who won the Tour de France last year, and he was the second best rider at the preparation races this year. And in the Tour de France, he collapses midway through, but he was not the worst rider by far in the first week and a half either. So I believe that we're basing this a lot on just the last week and a half of this Tour de France, and I think that Bernal is going to come stronger out of this, and I really believe that. And despite our history with Bernal, I do still believe that his time trial is not horrendous. It's average. It's not totally on the level of Roglic at all, but I feel like it's relatively on the level that Carapaz was at on the Vuelta regarding the time trial. So I think if those two time trials are together, why would you pick Bernal or Carapaz over Bernal? Just because Carapaz was better at this Vuelta, who was perhaps, I don't know, I feel like we're riding off Bernal too easily this way.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like something weird has gone on with Bernal. I mean, the Instagram stuff he's been putting up, doing like a lot of physiotherapy. It seems like there's some sort of, wasn't his like leg longer than the other one? I don't know. Well, maybe we'll talk about that on the Tour de France preview properly. Or, I mean, we don't want to make this just the Ineos podcast. Just a quick note, I had it down in my notes, just to reiterate, and this isn't really a talking point or controversial. Primoz Roglic, there's something in his brain that 99.9% of people will never have. I couldn't have done it. To have that harrowing defeat on the biggest platform of the sport in stage 20 of the Tour de France, when you've been wearing yellow, you've been laughing on stage 19, your team thought it was wrapped up, you go from that, you don't call your season then and go home and lick your wounds. You get back out there, where did he come? I want to read out, I'll make sure I do it justice and read it out correctly. So this year, he won the Slovenian Champs Road Race, second in the ITT, won Tour de l'Ain, winning 2 stages, won a stage of the Dauphiné, and was going to win GC, except for he just got hit by a car and had to pull out for precautionary measures. Then Tour de France obviously came second, winning a stage. He then came 6th in the World Champs Road Race, won Liège, won 4 stages, I think it was, at the Vuelta, and won GC and the points jersey. One of the best seasons ever in history, and the best overall rider in the world at the moment by PCS and UCI rankings. I think Wout van Aert's the best one-day rider in the world. So yeah, I just want to say that is insane from Roglic to be able to do that. And the amount of race days he's had, I know there's probably other riders that had more race days, but he's had to have every day on at the Vuelta and Tour de France. Every day he's the guy trying to protect the jersey, trying to protect his GC position. That's different to just going in the breakaway a couple of days, trying to win a stage here and there in these races. He's had to be on the whole time, and just an unbelievable season from Roglic. And I know probably there's the narrative that he fades in the third week, etc. I still don't know about that. I still don't know about the fading in the third week thing. Maybe, is it more likely, what do you think, Benji? Is it more likely that he was at the back end of the most insane schedule ever, so it's not surprising what happened on Covertia, as well as that crash, which this is what I still think. I still think that crash in the Dauphiné affected him a little bit for the Tour de France.
I don't know at all, but I feel like in general that we shouldn't look too much into the last week of this La Vuelta either. It's not even really the third week, but I feel like we can indeed say it like it is, and it's basically the end of a pretty messed up condensed season. But all in all, I feel like over the last 2 years that Roglic has shown more weakness in the last week than compared to the first 2 weeks of Grand Tours. Does that make him a weak rider in the third week? Not at all. He's just perhaps a bit more vulnerable in the third week for small little mistakes, or just in general that, I don't know, I feel like it might be too harsh saying that he fades away in the third week, but we've also seen it happen quite a few times. Last year in La Vuelta, the third week was also the weakest of the 3 weeks. But does it matter if you win the Grand Tour in the end? Not really. You only get criticized on it if you lose the Grand Tour after it. And I think that's where the difference lies. If you are able to make the difference high enough in the first 2 weeks of a Grand Tour to keep it at the end, then does it really matter?
Probably not. I mean, depends. It depends on who he's going up against. If he's going up against Tadej Pogacar, yeah, it matters.
Yeah, it
does. Because he's an animal. Let's go through maybe what's your top moment of this Vuelta. Mine is the Moncalvillo stage when I think Carapaz and Roglic went head to head. That's one of the only times I can remember Roglic attacking multiple times, getting a big gap in any Grand Tour. That was definitely one of my favorite moments of this entire season. Actually, I really liked that stage.
I've got one stage that is perhaps not at all in the memory of people anymore, but I think the one stage that has stayed in my mind was, I think it was stage 8? Was it stage 8? No, it was not stage 7. From Vitoria-Gasteiz to Villanueva. It's a stage that, when it comes to the profile, doesn't entirely look like it's going to offer too much outside of a transformative breakaway stage. It was somewhat that, but I feel like in general that stage had more to it. We had a stage with a bit of a circuit in it, and that was the stage where we saw a tiny bit of echelons, and where we saw that fierce battle in the breakaway with Valverde. And that breakaway battle will somewhat stay in my mind, to be honest. Just the sheer changes between Woods riding away there, the breakaway forming in 2 groups then, with Aramburu in the second group, Freil in the first group. If the first group fails, then Aramburu has an opportunity in the second group. So everybody except Freil in the first group has to work. And in that first group, you've got Valverde, a rider that has been at the top level of cycling for so many years, and it's the first time this year where we actually see him compete for a victory. And just that already gives it so much extra, because I feel like the last year, Valverde has more and more become a bit of a Zubelia in Grand Tours, where he subtly tries to get into the top 10, and then suddenly he is in the top 10. I think he tried it at the Tour de France, and I think he fell at the Tour de France. I'm not sure, but I recall him not getting in the top 10. Yes, he was devoured in the final time trial, getting 12th in the end, but we didn't see him too much in the Tour de France. And if we compare that to La Vuelta, where in this stage he was up there, then I do believe that Valverde has shown more in this Vuelta than he did in the Tour de France. He showed a better form, but he also wasn't as impressive as the final few years. But it still shows that he's got the spirit, he's got the experience, he's got some of the skill that he had in the past, and he's able to achieve these kinds of results. And he was pretty close that stage. And I think that whole stage in general stays in my mind a tiny bit more than the others, because it just was full action from the start till the end. And I think that's why I was so focused on it, compared to an Angliru perhaps, who is always a lovely climb, but I was kind of disappointed on it, if I can say that. It was horrendous for the people that were riding on it. I don't know if I would survive riding the Angliru. Genuinely, I'd probably die midway through. But looking at those riders riding at 5k an hour. No, probably a bit more than 5k an hour, but it looked like 5k an hour afterwards on the screen. And Hugh Carthy flying over that was all impressive, but it was just action for that one climb and perhaps only the last 5 kilometers of Angliru. And it was a very stressful battle on Angliru, but I enjoy stages that are a fierce battle all the way through. You don't see that too often, but that's why from last year's Vuelta, the only stage that is clearly in my mind right now is the stage from Guadalajara, which is not a mountain stage. It's just a flat stage, basically. And it was remembered because it was such an insane race all the way through, echelon-wise, and just the intense speed of the riders that day. And the eventual outcome of the stage is perhaps something that I don't fully remember anymore, which is kind of odd because the stage itself is in my memory quite a lot. So, yeah, I feel like stages that are not per se Queen stages can stick in your mind surprisingly. And somehow this stage was the one that sticks with me most of it, which perhaps says a lot about the Vuelta not really having a Queen stage, to be honest.
I think you mentioned him there, Alejandro Valverde. I think that he's taken a proper step back this year and last year. That stage you mentioned, normally you'd be expecting him to be winning that. I guess his reputation got the better of him because he just got attacked by Woods constantly because they didn't want to go to the line with him. But there were other stages, the one Magnus Cort won, just you'd be expecting him to be picking up a stage, it's particularly in a Vuelta with so many meaty mountain stages and so many punchy finishes. And he really wasn't competitive on the sort of 1K to 2K 6% climbs, which is surprising. Roglic, Martin dominated them. Even the first stage, he wasn't up there really. So, yeah, he's 40 years old. It's not surprising, but I think no victory this year, no professional victory in 2020. That's the first time in a long time for Alejandro Valverde. He only won 2 World Tour level races in 2019, one stage of the Vuelta, and a UAE Tour Stage 3. I'm trying to see what stage that was, what profile that was. That was up Jebel Hafid. So, yeah, I mean, the big stage, I'm not saying he had a bad 2019 because he still came second in the Vuelta, and that stage he won actually was ahead of Roglic on Mas de la Costa. That's the stage I remember from last year's Vuelta. But, yeah, I think Valverde, I don't know, he'd just be such an annoying rider to have as a teammate if you're Enric Mas or Soler. He's clearly riding for his own top 10 on GC. He's not picking up any stage wins. I mean, he's earned the right to do what he wants, but still, it'd be a little bit annoying. You can't get a pull out of him at all. He's my slightly disappointing rider for this year's Vuelta. I thought he was going to pick up a stage, as well as Esteban Chavez, who is getting paid the big money at Mitchelton Scott, and I know he had a fair few mechanicals, but I mean, him and Mitchelton Scott, terrible Vuelta. Obviously, the Giro, COVID hit them, not their fault there. Pretty forgettable Tour de France as well. Probably not Mitchelton Scott's best year probably their worst year for quite a while. They didn't pick up a stage, I don't think, in this year's Vuelta either. I don't even remember them having riders competitive in the breakaways, Benji. Rob Stannard and Dion Smith were their main stage winning candidates, but they didn't even they didn't get any climbers into breakaways, I don't think, except for maybe Nick Schultz. I mean, Mikel Nieve, 13th on GC. Once again, what is the point of that? What is the point of 13th on GC at this year's Vuelta? Like, is that really doing, like, the sponsors like thanks for the 13th on GC and the 0 seconds of TV exposure instead of getting in some breakaways? Like, why? If David Gaudu can win 2 stages at this year's Vuelta, Mikel Nieve could have won a stage or at least been on the podium for a couple of stages. They're similar level climbers, Nieve and Gaudu in my estimation. So, am I being too harsh, Benji, or do you think there was something I'm missing there with Nieve? Maybe Chavez, I'm being a little bit too critical because of the mechanicals, etc.
I just don't think Nieve is good enough at the moment. And honestly, I feel like Gaudu's higher at the moment. And we see Gaudu at the Tour de France. He had that injury from crashing in the fast day, if I recall correctly. And he never really came out of that. In the Tour de France, had to give up on stage 16. In the Vuelta, he started off with genuinely good results. I think he was out of the top 30 on stage 3 times in the whole Grand Tour. And he was top 20 in most of the stages. And he indeed ended up winning 2 that perhaps were against competition that he should win against in the breakaway. But Pinot put on Twitter or said something in an interview in France that he believes that Gaudu should be the leader for FDJ in the coming years in Grand Tours. And I feel like that's a very respectful thing to say by Thibaut Pinot, because Pinot has never been the rider that is dishonest about everything. He's honest about his feelings on something, and as a consequence, I feel like he's at the moment in his career that he doesn't want to be disappointed again. I feel like it's literally that, which is perhaps a bit of a weak thing if you talk about it. But on the other hand, you've got Gaudu, who has shown clear talent, who needs to get an opportunity for stage races, in my honest opinion, very soon. And he's 24. He's at a level where I believe he can achieve stuff in Grand Tours. I don't believe he can win a Grand Tour. I don't believe he can top 5 a Grand Tour. But it would be great if he can get, well, he did get 8th already in this Vuelta, so he could technically top 5 a Grand Tour, to be honest, looking at it now. So might it be worth for FDJ to go for Gaudu, or do you believe that Pinot still has an opportunity of shining through? I think that it's cool to see Gaudu having that step forward, but I don't believe that Pinot was that terrible as a Grand Tour leader, and he was perhaps the best climber in 2019.
I'm an irrational Thibaut Pinot stan. That's why that's why I'm so harsh on him sometimes, because I think he's so good. And I'm like, no, Thibaut, it's not time to hang it up yet and say you're not going to be a Grand Tour contender anymore. I know the record is terrible, I know, but he's a year younger than Roglic. Roglic is 31 and just had one of the best ever GC years in a long, long time. Probably since one of Froome's years. So I think Pinot shouldn't. It's not time to give up on that dream yet. I mean, just go to the Giro. Just go to the Giro again, or just do something different. It doesn't have to be the Tour. Or go to the Vuelta. I don't know. See whatever fits best with you. Target Lombardia, a race he's so good at. Target those Italian classics, and then maybe do the Giro at the start of the year. Get out of the Tour de France bubble where there's so much pressure, etc. Is he good? Is Thibaut Pinot, if he turned up to the Giro on good form, I mean, I haven't looked at the route, etc. But on a normal GC year, if Pogacar and co aren't there and they're going to the Tour, if Pinot goes to Giro, I'd have him as a favourite for the podium. Still, even now. So that is better than what I think Gaudu can do. So I don't think but again, it's his decision, Pinot. I mean, the thing is, he's still going to have to train just as hard, and probably will train just as hard. So just go into the race with less pressure. Just say, we'll see what happens. See how the legs feel. And, hey, maybe even just let Gaudu go on breakaways. Don't have the team sacrificing themselves for you at all. Take that pressure off. And sometimes you don't even need to train for a lot of these stages. If Jumbo-Visma are there, well, there's your train for you. There's the race being controlled for you. So maybe if you get into the leader's jersey later, you can change things up. But yeah, I think he should still go, Pinot, and I don't see that as Gaudu's future next year at least. Although he won l'Avenir back in 17. So if you win Tour de l'Avenir, you're probably going to win the Tour de France at some point based on Pogacar and Bernal's recent history. But a few other things from this Vuelta, Benji. Any riders that really exceeded your expectations? Anyone you thought, wow, they are much better than I actually thought they were capable of? The obvious answer, and I'll take the obvious one away from you, is Hugh Carthy.
Yeah, okay. You can take Hugh Carthy. I think it's indeed a rather obvious answer that we did not see getting third at a Grand Tour this year. And he started off at Caja, showed real talent. It's weird to see that British riders come from a Spanish team like Caja Rural in the past. I still can't wrap my head. Wow, can't talk either. I still can't wrap my head around it. But he clearly has talent now. We knew that, but it didn't come true in the previous years. And this is the first time next to one of the preparation races, I think this year or last year, where he really steps up to the top level of cycling. And this is great. I love having more people at the top of cycling, and it's a bit of the changing of the guard that they call it every time. So, yeah, good choice of you. I've got a few names, but I'd love to turn it back 1 second and talk about one rider that disappointed me before I name the riders that exceeded expectations for me. And a rider that not per se disappointed, but throughout the whole season of 2020 did not reach any position above the top 60 in any stage of a Grand Tour, and that's TJ Van Garderen. Like, I don't know what he did this year. I don't know. They took him to 2 Grand Tours and he has not done anything. And you could say perhaps he helped out the team, but I didn't see him help out the team too much. So, unless TJ Van Garderen got demoted to being a bottle carrier in stages, I really don't know what he does in the stages. And I feel like he might be closing towards the end of his era, to be honest. And I'm genuinely disappointed with TJ Van Garderen. And that's not because I had him for a time trial somewhere in the season, but just in general, I feel like I expect more from TJ. And he won a stage last year. Was it last year that he won a stage in the Grand Tour? No, he did not, apparently.
Wait, what?
2018.
What?
2018? 2017? Oh my god, is it that old?
It
was 2017?
I don't know what you...
Oh my god.
Have you been in like a time? Have you lost a couple of years of your life, Benji? Mate, he's not been good for a couple of years.
Yeah, but not at this level.
2019. What are you talking about?
2017, sorry. It's like 2 years difference. Oh, potatoes. It's all the same. But let's skip it. Okay, riders that exceeded expectations. Let's talk about those.
No. I accept your point. I accept your point that like I don't know what's going on. He's been a pro rider. He was at Rabobank Conti team in 2008. He's been a pro rider for a long time now. He was World Tour when he was 22, 21 years old. So, yes, it's a long time. So maybe he's sick of it. I'm not sure. It's kind of education first. I got to say, in our season awards, we'll probably talk about them, that they really overperformed this year. But it's always the riders that aren't the big names on EF. It's like Caicedo, Carthy before the Vuelta wasn't like their biggest name. Who else?
Martinez with the Dauphiné.
Martinez wasn't before the Dauphiné. Ruben Guerrero, etc. And then there's that. So that Bettiol often is like a proper elite one-day rider, but like those guys are never in their marketing. And then there's like the second half of the team that's in the marketing that you forget they're in the races. But yeah. EF overperformed this year, so that's not meant as a criticism. They won a lot of stages and a lot of races, and good on them for extending all the guys that don't have contracts for next year in 2021 as well. Bit of news for you. But sorry, Benji, who was your man that exceeded expectations?
There's a few riders. Firstly, I'd like to take a look at the sprints of the first week and so on of this Grand Tour, and there was this Belgian sprinter that not a lot of people have heard about before this Grand Tour, and that is Herman Tyson. I genuinely didn't really know too much of him. I knew he had a result at Hoek-Sepel at the start of the year. Last year he was decent at some U23 races, I think. And this year he kind of broke through, and that's pretty cool to see. We have a rider that... We have 2 Belgian sprinters in this Grand Tour, and I don't recall me able to say that too often recently. He got 5th on that stage 4, and he got 2nd on a stage as well after the, crucifixion of Bennett in stage 9. And that is a better result than I expected compared to a Max Kanter who perhaps showed a lot of talent in the previous years, but also stepped up in this Vuelta for a 7th place, a 3rd place, and another 3rd place. So 2 podiums by Max Kanter as well. a rider that has been in World Tour for 2 years now and has not really been at the top level yet. And I feel like he's just breaking through now. He was great at sprinting at U23 level in 2018. I think he won a stage at L'Avenir that year. And all in all, just one stage left and right in races. And I think mainly 2017 as well. No, 2017 he won one race. But all in all, he had the talent for sprinting. He came through in this Vuelta as well. So those are the two sprinters I want to point out. But also this French one, and I never really heard of him too much outside of having him on Pro Cycling Manager at a certain point. And that's Emmanuel Murray. He rides for Cofidis. He had two top 10s and an 11th place in sprints in this Vuelta. He's 25 years old, perhaps a bit older than you need to be considered a young talent these days. But he was also pretty good at Tropicale Amisabongo at the start of the year. And he never really broke through yet on World Tour level. This is the first time he's getting proper top 10s in a World Tour stage or World Tour stages. So those three sprinters or riders that I wouldn't have per se had in my top 10 of sprint stage. And Max Kanter perhaps, but the other two were surprising to me. And Herman Tyson, most of all, that he's able to get a second place after, I just didn't expect it. Yeah, not at all. Outside of sprinters, and if we look at proper GC, I was looking forward to seeing Vlasov. He had a bit of a bad day on the first day and only came back from that after that and slowly but surely made his way up in GC. Ended 11th in the end. Perhaps should have gone for an intermediate sprint somewhere to try and get past El Valverde, who is 10th in GC at the end of this Grand Tour. But he's not really a rider that surprised me per se. I think Will Barta, we can say after that time trial, to be one of the decent level time trials, now able to win Grand Tour time trials in the future. That is for sure. So that is a rider I'd like to name. But I would also like to mention Clément Champoussin, French rider. He did not really do what we expected of him perhaps in the breakaways. He was in the breakaway once, I think, on Formigal, but I'm not sure it was Formigal. And outside of that, he was, for example, 10th on Moncalvillo. That it's not easy, and I hear a train in your background, and I'm super surprised by it. But I'm going to pretend I didn't hear it.
I'm at an Airbnb on the Central Coast. Let me mute my mic.
No worries. Two top 10s with Champoussin on mountain stages, and Oli Champoussin is perhaps one of the riders that France needs to look forward to in their future. The man is 22 and shows clear talent. And 31st in GC is perhaps not something that shouts wow, but it shows talent. And all in all, he was not a bad rider in this Grand Tour. And I look forward to seeing him in the future. Same for Kobe Goossens, Lotto Soudal rider, doing something similar, 24th in GC. And I think those are the riders that we're really looking forward to in the future. Gino made it. Do you believe that he overstepped himself, or did you feel like this was coming, knowing what results he has already put on the table last year?
I mean, when you look at the under-23 crop he came from and the names who he was mixing up with in the final climb of that under-23 World Champs road race in 2018, then him performing at a high level is not a surprise. In fact, he's probably been a bit underperforming compared to those other guys. So I'm pretty sure I'm getting the right World Champs road race. But so, yeah, I wasn't surprised by that. It was good to see that. I want to give you another name, Alfred Wright, 4th on the Puebla de Sanabria stage, 21 years old, British rider for Byron McLaren. Obviously, I mean, there's the aero benefits of the cold jersey, so, I mean, I don't know how much you have to factor into that, but still, 4th on a Grand Tour stage. I'm not sure what sort of lead out he was getting, to be honest. Probably pretty much looking after himself behind Philipsen, Ackermann and Steimler. Very, very nice result, and not that far behind them either. So that he's a man to watch. Could he be cleaning up? I know there's no Tour de Yorkshire next year, but if he's only 21. Tour de Yorkshire in 2022. Pray to God. I'd expect him to be picking up a stage, getting his top threes in that sort of stage, or those sort of races. One to watch. And Philipsen, if I had to take a sprinter, maybe people think I'm being controversial for the sake of it, but I genuinely believe this. If you had to give me one sprinter out of Philipsen or Bennett or Ackermann, I'd take Philipsen for the next 5 years, or 3, even maybe for the next 3 years. I'd take Philipsen. This year, Bennett's probably a better sprinter, but next 3 years, I'd take Philipsen. I'd take Philipsen over Bennett because more versatile. I think he's going to be better in a variety of terrain and Grand Tour stages. He doesn't mind a climb too much. And yeah, I don't think look what he can do without too much of a lead-out train, although Rybachenko and Oliveira did a nice job for him. I think he's really, really talented. And I don't know if it's a shame. We'll wait to see whether it's a shame or a good thing that he's going to Alpecin Phoenix. Is he going to be competing with Tim Merlier for who's going to be the top dog in the sprints? Or is Merlier and Mathieu van der Poel going to be leading him out and he's going to have one of the best lead-out trains in all of World Tour cycling, even though they're a Pro Conti team? So, yeah, I can't wait to see what Philipsen does next year, even in the Classics races as well. Do you think I'm a bit too high on Philipsen, Benji? I know he's Belgian, so you're probably trying to temper your enthusiasm. He's only 22 years old.
Yeah, and the thing is, he's indeed talented right now, but he's got so much growth potential compared to riders that have already put themselves on the table, like an Ackermann, like a Bennett, like you say. I believe those races have reached their max potential somewhat. Perhaps they can have a bit more of a percentage next couple of years or less. And Philipsen just has a wider margin to grow in, I believe, in the coming years. He stepped onto the World Tour profile by winning that stage in Santos Down Under last year. And he started this season off with 4 top 5s at the Santos Down Under. And, well, we could say Santos Down Under, but it's not per se a horrible competition. Caleb Ewan's there every single time. And Caleb Ewan wins almost every single time. But we don't need to put the details on that. Caleb Ewan as a competitor for Philipsen in the future for sure. And Ewan is also still pretty young. Like, we go over Caleb Ewan like he's been on the scene for a while, but I remember 8 years ago hearing from this Australian kid that sprinted with his nose on his front tire like McEwen did in the medieval ages. And yeah, Ewan stepped forward after a few years of being in the mix already, but I still believe that with his 26 years old, he's got so many years still to come at this top level of cycling. And
No, I disagree.
I believe Ewan is going. Do you believe that Ewan is just going to disappear at some point, or what?
3 years max.
Why?
I think sprinters drop off from 30 onwards is just massive.
Is it because he's Australian?
No. It's just sprinters drop off way sooner than Grand Tour riders. Now, maybe someone can throw some statistics at me about why that's not the case, but
well,
Marcel
2 years ago,
Kittel,
Greipel, I mean. Not now.
I just think, like, physiologically, they need that snap. I mean, Greipel won stage in the Tour de France when he was 34 years old, so I get it. But he still wasn't as good as he was. So he wasn't. He was no longer the best sprinter in the world, or even probably the top 2 or 3. Yeah, but he was definitely in the top 2 or 3. And I think, I think maybe Ewan, he can elongate it a bit more because he's not relying on putting down 2,000 watts, etc. But I think sprinting, I think it's a young man's game. And I think 30, once you go on the wrong side of 30, it really becomes a lot harder for you. And there's going to be just new guys on the block. So, we'll wait and see. But, I think Ewan's best years are last year, this year, and the next 2 years will be the best years of his career. I think if you look at Cavendish's best years, they were in a similar sort of time frame. And Cavendish and Ewan, I think, are similar style sprinters. As close a comparison as I can get in terms of size and the way they won races. Philipsen, I think, is different to Ewan in the way he gets over climbs, the sort of sprints he can win. I think he's more versatile, more of a one-day guy. Can't wait to see him at Gent-Wevelgem with Mathieu van der Poel and Alpecin Phoenix. That's going to be really interesting to see how they use him, presuming he goes there. But that's enough on him. Any last thoughts on this Vuelta, Benji? I mean, what would you like to see next year for this Vuelta? What would you do if you were ASO trying to make sure you got the best competition to come here in the best form to have the best race? What would you, in an Olympic year, with an earlier Tour de France, do you need to do anything? Are we going to see stronger competition because of that nice gap between the Tour and the Vuelta next year?
I believe that in previous years, the season always starts with the Vuelta being the last portion of the season. There's not too many riders that focus all out for La Vuelta because there's so many races beforehand that they could have a go at. And the Vuelta really becomes an idea just after the Tour de France, where you have both the riders that perhaps rode the Giro and still won the next Tour Grand Tour on their palmarès for that season. And you've got the riders that went to the Tour de France and perhaps failed in doing what they wanted to achieve. And that always brings an extra level of competition to La Vuelta. And I believe the fact that we've got so many riders at the top level of cycling right now, because I believe looking at the Tour de France, you've obviously got Roglic, you've got Pogacar, but there's plenty of riders near, not close to that level, but like near that level somewhat. And I'm talking about a Thomas, I'm talking about a Carapaz, I'm talking about an Enric Mas, I'm talking about...
He's 25.
Yeah, there's so many riders at the top level of cycling right now that you're destined to have a good start list at La Vuelta next year. And as a consequence of perhaps also the fact that you've got the youngsters moving up this year, that adds a lot to it, because Hugh Carthy, Geoghegan Hart, Hindley, we have to count them with the top guns, even if... Yeah, we have to count them. There's no if there.
Carthy definitely. I think Carthy's legit.
You don't think Geoghegan Hart is legit?
I would take Carthy over Geoghegan Hart.
I would take Geoghegan Hart over Carthy.
Oh, I don't think you ever would have seen Geoghegan Hart keeping up with those big boys and winning Angleroo. I think that's a different level of talent. But anyway,
I'm doing this. Carthy is 26. And I believe that he's nearing the top level that he can become. If we're looking at Geoghegan Hart, he is not 26. What age is he? 25. Okay,
he's 25. He's not that much younger, yeah.
But somehow I believe that Geoghegan Hart has still more growth potential than Carthy. That's what I have on my mind. And honestly, I believe Carthy is not a better climber than Geoghegan Hart.
I don't know. Geoghegan Hart's been in the Sky setup for a long time. Carthy came into EF in 2017. He's a year older than him. I think he's got a better I think he's got more TT potential. Yeah, I don't know. I think Carthy. I think Carthy's legit. I just think that Angleroo, you can't fake it on Angleroo. There's no hiding there. And I know it's a pure watts per kilo test, but he's 1.93 meters tall. Like I think Carthy's legit, and yeah, I think he could win. He could win the Vuelta next year, if depending on the start list, depending on the profile, etc. I don't know where he lost time this year. He seemed to lose time on all the really punchy finishes. So it seems to me that a longer, steadier climb, or just a longer, harder climb suited Carthy this Vuelta. Versus the punchy finishes Roglic put not only the bonus seconds into him, but Roglic gapped him many times on those finishes. I think that was even the protest, the stage that they were protesting about. Carthy actually lost like a fair few seconds to Roglic. But yeah, I think I would probably be taking Carthy over Geoghegan Hart. Maybe that's sacrilege in the UK. I'm not sure. I also think Carthy is... he's got a rare personality that I think he's actually really funny, and I love his personality in the interviews. So maybe I'm just biased in that respect. If I wanted to attract bigger name riders to the Vuelta next year, what would I do? Well, if you don't want to pay Remco Evenepoel to turn up, just put a lot of TT kilometers in it. Then you'll get Ganna, Evenepoel, and then you get a lot of interest. Is Sagan going to be as big a name next year? I know the Giro paid a lot of money for Sagan to turn up this year. Did they get the return on that? I don't think so personally. And judging from the comments Venny made in an interview the other day on Instagram that was translated by LFR, I don't feel like he felt like they got the best value for money either. So who are going to be the big names in the game next year? I'd say Pogacar, Thomas, Ganna, Evenepoel, will be the big names. I still think Roglic, back-to-back best rider in the world. He's not like... What is it, Benji? I mean, that's a good note to finish this on. The winner of this year's Vuelta, back-to-back winner of the Vuelta, back-to-back best rider in the world. What is it about Roglic that doesn't... I don't know, like, why wouldn't race organisers be lining up to pay Roglic to turn up to their Grand Tour next year?
Well, firstly, I'm against the whole paying to have someone turn them up at the start, because then they're basically a product you're buying. And looking at how that's turned out for Sagan, you will always have, if that rider disappoints, that race director being like, but he didn't do what we paid him for. But, dude, you shouldn't expect stuff if you...
Well, Sagan tried his best too, you could tell.
Yeah.
Like, he wasn't... He probably didn't really want to go for the Ciclamino, and he knew it was gone, but he felt he had to because he was kind of getting paid to be there.
I feel like Venny has me on two sides. I love his personality on some standpoints, but I dislike his personality on other standpoints. And I think I dislike his personality on this standpoint because I believe you can't really blame the rider for that you made a bad investment. That's your problem. It's your own choice. That the rider just saw money and he was like, okay, sure, why not? So obviously they're going to go if you pay enough. So all in all, the paying for having someone turn up, perhaps not really my thing, but you're right. Roglic is indeed a rider that is... You're saying all the Grand Tours might be lining up for him in the future, but Grand Tours should not have a problem with getting top riders in 2021 at their start. And it surprised me that they even had Sagan, well, we're paying for Sagan to be at the start. Like, definitely now, if that was like in 2013, 2014 at his prime, I would have been like, sure, that's perhaps more of a thing. But it was at the point where we were starting to doubt Sagan's abilities. And we've seen Sagan throughout this year, and I feel like Sagan has not really been at the level that... I wouldn't say that he wasn't at the level that we were expecting. I wasn't expecting more than this, but I feel like it's clear that he just doesn't seem like he's enjoying cycling anymore. I don't know why, but I feel that way if I look at Sagan on a bike right now. And it looks like he was just making way more fun with cycling in the last 2 years. Like in 2014 is 2015, 2015 is not a word, but I'll pretend it was. 2016, just that era, it feels like he enjoyed it more. And I feel like the less he enjoys it, the less cool stuff we see from him. And perhaps, yeah, I don't know. I said 2 years ago that I wasn't expecting Sagan to, after his Bora Hansgrohe contract ends, to go for a transfer. I believe he'll do something else than cycling.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, it's funny to me. You kind of proved my point, Benji. You forgot about the man I asked the question about, and the question was, why do people not think about this man enough? Primoz Roglic.
Fuck.
Primoz Roglic is on the level of peak Froome, peak Contador.
Yeah, sure.
Peak Armstrong. You know, like I'm not saying he's doping. What I'm saying is he's like the most dominant. Well, he lost the Tour. Maybe that's not right. But the best overall rider in the world. But then the question is, well, is he? Is it Jumbo-Visma? How would he go outside of Jumbo-Visma? If Carapaz was on Jumbo-Visma and Roglic was on Ineos, who would have won the Vuelta this year? So I think that plays into it as to why maybe he doesn't get the respect he deserves. It's also the bonus second thing, the sprinting the last 500 meters of the mountain stage thing. It doesn't seem as dominant as attacking earlier and getting a 30-second gap. So if Roglic gets 3 sets of 10-second bonus seconds and everyone else at the same time across 3 stages, that's a 30-second gap. But if Contador got a 30-second gap on a stage on a climb, people were like, oh my God, Contador just like destroyed that guy that day, proper gap, way better climber, etc. But they're the same time gap. And I would say you can bank the Roglic time gaps before any Grand Tour with bonification. You can just bank them because he's going to get time gaps on people in the bonus seconds. So there's that element as well. Then I think it's maybe the English second language thing as well. They always get penalised. Like maybe he's not the most charismatic guy. Seems like a nice guy, but not the most charismatic guy. I saw there was an hour-long interview put up with him on social media. I mean, you couldn't pay me to watch that, to be honest. But I think there's all the confluence of all those things. And I'm not saying he doesn't have to be. He doesn't have to. His job is to ride bikes. But I'm saying that's the reason why maybe he's not like. And I know, by the way, if I put Richard Carapaz in the title of a video, Richard Carapaz gets more views than Primoz Roglic. Does that surprise you, Benji?
No, because I believe that Southern American riders have a bigger following anyway compared to anyone from Europe. Because if you've put Iran in a title, you're gonna get more views than.
It's not even from South Americans.
Just the feeling in general. Is it?
It's not even the demographics of the countries. Maybe there's a few more Ecuadorians, but it's a big difference. We're talking a 30 to 40% difference, and it's not just from South Americans. Maybe it's the Ineos thing.
I'm not sure, to be honest. I do feel like looking at it, that Roglic, it might be a second language thing, and I've noticed that he doesn't seem too eager with press stuff, and just because he seems a bit more shy with press stuff, his Vuelta speech in 2019 was horrendous. Like, genuinely. It had no personality in it, and I was disappointed from that speech, and I believe that the first moment where I saw Roglic having actual proper feelings in an interview after a race, this is not criticism or anything, this is just assessment or observation, you could call it. And the only moment that I felt like, yeah, he's genuinely happy about this was after the time trial in this Vuelta, because he seemed just to be freed, and he seemed to be able to speak more freely in that. And yeah, I feel in general that the moments that I see Roglic having more personality and more a resemblance in personality that we have towards cycling. For example, the moment he crosses the line and starts shouting, yes, I did it. I saw that on the time trial, and we also saw that on the final stage where he secured GC, that he did that. And those screams had more personality than the entire interviews throughout the Grand Tour. And this is not criticism. This is just the fact that I noticed that if he's in press or media or stuff like that, he's less eager to show himself for who he is.
And we know he's got it. Because you see the Jumbo-Visma documentaries, he gets fired up. He's like, fuck those guys. I'm going to fucking destroy them in the TT. Or maybe that was Grisha that said that. But Roglic was like, yeah, like it's in there. There's like a bit of anger and mongrel in him too. So maybe he wants to be a nice guy to the press. I did like his jokes about not bad for a sprinter because he's won the points jersey the whole time.
That's true.
And the people saying, why does it matter? Why does it matter? Why are you criticizing a bike rider's personality? What does it matter? Well, you got to remember this is an entertainment industry. And do you think for Formula One and the sort of the growth, I would say, of Formula One and the consciousness of important demographics over the last 18 months, do you think Max Verstappen and Daniel Ricciardo's personalities had an important part to play in that? And I think the answer can only be yes. I think sports are personality driven in combination with the exciting events on the field, on the road, whatever. NBA, we know an example of it. Lance was as big as Tiger Woods and LeBron James is today relative to the time period he was in. Because I know he had the advantage of the American market, etc., but because of the personality, etc., I think Remco's got a bit of that. And I think cycling will grow a lot with some big personalities. And I've been talking with people about how we can bring that in. Maybe that's for our next off-season potty. But how about this, Benji? We could have had a stages in this year's Vuelta where all the 5 riders in that breakaway that Mike Woods won, Valverde, Fraile, and Mike Woods, etc., all 5 of them have to sit at a press conference like in Formula One at the same time and listen to questions, answer questions. That would be so good for social media, because I know, weren't they criticising Mike Woods? Or like in the Giro, when who was saying that they hated Ruben Guerrero for sitting on? He was a dickhead in the breakaway all day. So, stuff like that, because that's one of the ideas we can have for next year's Grand Tours, have press conferences like that. But we've gone off topic now. Thank you. Before we get into the proper off-season content, Benji and I, by the way, haven't spoken to each other in a week, so maybe we got a little bit overexcited talking cycling to each other once again. Thank you for supporting us throughout this podcast, starting, I think, a week before the Tour de France at the Bretagne Classic and GP Plouay, going all the way through, covering every World Tour and Women's World Tour race since then. We're obviously continuing it next year. It's been an unbelievable success. It's looking like it's going to be financially sustainable in 2021, and we've both got big news for you in 2021 as well. I've been working on some pretty exciting things in the background, even in the last week. Benji's working on some stuff, some projects on his own as well, and hopefully we might be able to tease some of them out in the off-season content, depending on how those talks or projects develop. But that's all from me today. Thanks to Nicole for supporting the Lanterne Rouge Cycling Podcast through the Giro and the Vuelta, and I'll let Benji take you away.
Okay, so I've got the opportunity of leading you into the end of this beautiful episode, but I believe that I should thank you one extra time, because not only have you guys and girls supported us so freaking awesome throughout the season, you've brought us so many good ideas for the off-season. We're going to be doing off-season pods. How frequently, don't know yet. We're going to be announcing that on the community tab of our YouTube channel and on Twitter perhaps, or on Instagram or whatever, pretty soon on how we're going to kind of schedule this off-season, because I feel like we should have some kind of schedule in it that people know when to expect the podcasts a bit. So we'll talk about that after this episode, Lantern. But in general, I believe that we need to thank you once again. It's been an absolute ride from the start. We started off with Bretagne Classic as our first podcast because we wanted to see how it would develop and how we would be able to do a podcast like that, and how we'd be able to talk to each other for an hour and be able to fill that time, because that was something I wasn't sure about, because I was used to making 15-minute, 20-minute videos on YouTube on my own channel, and I think you had similar stuff. You prepare your videos, you check the footage that you want to use, you bind that together, and you start talking about it. But we never really had this long-form conversation thing you had with Rouge Report and so forth, but I never really had that. I think I did it once in the past, so it was a bit of a new experience. It really clicked. Like, us as a duo, I feel like we're pretty compatible in these kind of things, and I feel like we're also pretty open to each other's feedback on this stuff, and that really betters the content for it. So I also want to thank you for this opportunity. I had the honor of doing this for one season. I'm looking forward to the coming seasons as well, but I'm also very much looking forward to the podcast in the off season, because we've got so many ideas from you guys, and if you've got any more, drop it below. If they're good, we're going to try and use it. Most likely it's going to be an idea that's already on the list, because I swear we've got like 150 things on there, and yeah, that's crazy. There's no way we can do 150 podcasts in the off season, but we'll try and do whatever we can. And there's some good ideas. I'm looking forward to it, and I want to thank you once again. That's basically it. So guess we'll see you next time. Ciao.
Hugh Carthy is better than Tag Gegenhardt.
No, he is not.